In my last video, I talked about the inconsistencies in the photography regarding the locations of the window boys. And in this video, I'm going to talk specifically about the inconsistencies in the photography of Tom Dillard. Dillard was in one of the press cars behind the president's car, several cars behind the president's car in the motorcade. And after the shooting, he pointed his camera up to the Texas School Book Depository and took a picture, he said, after Robert Jackson said there was a gun in a window up in one of the windows there. He didn't know which window, and he took a picture, and then he took another picture. That's what he said, according to his Warren Commission testimony. And here we have what are called by the Warren Commission Dillard Exhibit A and B, A on the left and B on the right. And we can see an inconsistency here, as I call it, where we can see that in the one on the left we see two people, one in each window. Oh, I didn't circle it right on the right. I circled two sets of windows on the right, but the right-hand set there would correspond to Exhibit A, and I can't see anybody in either window there. So I call that an inconsistency. Now you could think, well, if these are two different photographs, that means they weren't taken at the same time, and therefore whoever was in the window in one photograph might have not be there in the other because they either moved out of the windows or they moved into the windows. And that makes sense. But the trouble here is that Dillard says both of these photographs, both of these photographic prints were taken from the same negative. Therefore, it doesn't make sense. It would only make sense if they were two different photos. But if it's the same photo and one's just an enlargement of the other, then you should be able to see you should be able to see that there's somebody in the window even in the wide-angle version. Anyway, this is the relevant testimony here, where Mr. Ball says a short wide lens and one long lens. Now, see, he had just asked Dillard what kind of lenses he used, and one of them was a telephoto lens, which you would think would be the close-up, which is Dillard Exhibit A, and the other would be a wide-angle lens, which you would think would be the picture on the right, Dillard Exhibit B. I show you two pictures, and I mark 1A and mark 1B. So Mr. Ball has marked the exhibits as A and B. Look them over and tell me whether or not those are prints from the pictures you made that day. These are prints from one of the negatives I made on November 2nd. Now, literally what he's saying is that there are two prints made from the same negative. And then Mr. Ball says, and then you will furnish us two prints, one from each negative, which we will mark as C and D. And you will initial them. Is that correct? That is correct. Do you mind initialing the A and B? And we will make it part of this deposition. Just on the back, one of them will be the same picture as these two. These two are prints from one of my negatives. So the pictures that Dillard is talking about are two photos printed from one negative. And according to Mr. Ball, he has marked them as A and B. So what they're saying here apparently means that these two photos, exhibits A and B, were taken from the same negative. One of them, now when he's talking about coming back with prints from both negatives, he says one of them will be the same picture as these two. These two are prints from one of my negatives. That will be right. I have another negative, which you will make a print of, if you wish. Very weird testimony here, I think. And it's very weird that he didn't initially come in with a print of each negative, but rather he says a print, two prints from the same negative. So that would mean that one would be an enlargement of the other. So what he's saying in the testimony, if these are correctly marked in their exhibit letters, is that the picture on the left is an enlargement from the same picture on the right. And if that's true, we should be able to see somebody in those windows, but we can't. Now, looking at these two pictures, they do appear to have been taken from different angles, and the camera being in a different position too. That could be the case, and maybe there's some confusion here about marking the exhibits. But that can also be done in the darkroom. You can change the angle on the surface to which the negative is projected under the projector, and the angle of the paper on the table of the projector. By doing things like that, you can make it look like it's taken from a different position. And maybe that was done here, I don't know. But given the weirdness of the Dillard testimony, I'm very suspicious that that is what was done. And the reason you would do such a thing would be to make it look like they were different photographs. But he clearly says in his testimony that the two pictures he's looking at while he's testifying, which have been marked Exhibits A and B, which the Warren Commission tells us that these are, he's clearly saying that they both came from the same negative. And if that's the case, we should be able to see these people in the windows in both photographs. We don't have any subsequent interview from Dillard, but we do have Dillard Exhibits C and D. So presumably, Dillard did provide the Warren Commission with prints from each negative that were called C and D. The trouble with that is that C and D are exactly the same as A and B. They're not the same prints, but they're obviously from the same source. So if A and B were really two prints from the same negative, then C and D probably are too. And that just makes it more confusing. Now, it could be that after the Warren Commission received C and D, they decided to make A and B, they decided to remark them. But if these are actual prints provided by Dillard, then the only thing that makes sense here is that Dillard was saying that A and B were from the same negative, and he provided C and D as if they were from two different negatives. And you can think lots of different things might have happened here, but I think something's being covered up because it doesn't make sense. And I think probably Dillard took one photograph, and it was probably Dillard Exhibit B, and then an enlargement was done to put these two guys in the windows. That's Bonnie Ray Williams and Harold Norman, and to pretend that they're two different photographs. But in his Warren Commission testimony, he didn't talk as if they were two different photographs. He talked as if they were, one was an enlargement of the other. I think that's probably the truth, and that A was altered to make it look as though those two people are in the windows. So I think the whole point of this is that after the fact, the authorities, who are probably telling Dillard what to do here, are trying to make it look as though Norman was in a window, visible, not doing anything, but watching the scene, when really he wasn't. At this point, I think he and Jarman had probably already started running down to the other end of the building, where they were to throw out Jarman's rifle out the window, and presumably their walkie-talkie, as I have covered in other videos. And this is also from Dillard's testimony. Did you see anything in the windows? No. Did you see a rifle barrel? No. But you did see some figures or forms in the window? Only in the windows, which was the window below. How many forms did you see in the window below? I saw two men in the windows, at least the arched windows. I saw them in my picture. I was making the picture my eyes were covering. You saw them as you were taking the picture? I may have. I don't know. Do you remember if you saw 2 or 3 figures? I don't remember. And later in his testimony, you developed your pictures, didn't you? I don't remember. Or did you turn them over? I printed them. You printed them? So apparently what he's saying here is that he saw the figures in the windows below, which are Bonnie Ray Williams and Harold Norman, that we see in Dillard Exhibit A, but he doesn't remember seeing them when he took the picture originally. All this, I think, is very weird sounding, because I think Dillard knows, and perhaps he did the work himself, that the Dillard Exhibit A is an altered image, and he saw those people in the window when he printed the photo, but he didn't see them when he took the photo. And I think that explains why this testimony is so weird. This can be confusing, so if you want to understand it, you should think about it. You should carefully read Dillard's testimony on these points and look at the exhibits. It's difficult if you're just reading the text of his testimony, because they don't put the pictures, the Dillard exhibit pictures, with the text. You have to go find the pictures yourself and see what they're talking about. And when you do that, you realize that this doesn't really make any sense. And I think the explanation for it not making sense is that Dillard's photography was altered in order to make it look as though Harold Norman was in that window when he wasn't really in that window, so that you can't put together what happened on the 5th floor with the window boys.